Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Health Mastery Show. Today I have on with me one of my good friends, Brian Háonghusa. Brian is a nutritionist at the Fit Clinic, and this was going to be a solo episode, or the first solo episode of the podcast, but Brian has similar thinking and philosophy to myself, and I thought it would be great to have him on to have this discussion with him. So today we talk all about dealing with adversity, his coaching philosophies, and also maybe some strategies for nutrition or productivity or training during this whole pandemic. We don't talk about how to not get the coronavirus or treating the coronavirus, so leave that for the medical field, but we do talk about perhaps some of the rubbish that has been put out in the fitness or health industry with regards to boosting your immune system. But I hope you find this episode enjoyable. Definitely is something a little bit different. I enjoy talking to Brian, as I always do, and if you have any feedback, please do let me know, and as always, if you can, please leave a rating and review. But let's get into the episode with Brian. Hi Brian, it's great to have you on, man.
Hey Adam, what's up, dude?
And for people who don't know you, give a little bit of intro into yourself, who you are, what you do, and then maybe how we know each other.
Yeah, sweet. So my name is Brian Háonghusa. Don't try and spell my last name; it's a tough one. But I am a nutrition coach and nutritionist. I studied human nutrition in UCD, and now I am the head coach in the Fit Clinic, which is an online nutrition coaching and consultancy service. So we work with a very, very wide range of people one-to-one online to help them with their nutrition and overall lifestyle habits. And so I've been interested in nutrition since so we know each other from playing basketball back when we were teenagers. So we've been friends a while at this point. And I was skinny as a teenager and playing ball at the same time. So I wanted to get bigger and stronger to be a better athlete, basically. So as soon as I was old enough to join the gym, I did. And I definitely would have reached out to you at the time to kind of get a head start, I suppose. Or you were someone that was ahead of me in that context. And I remember, you suggested, I think, bodybuilding.com. It was the first time I went on bodybuilding.com based on your recommendation. And then even later on, I think you were probably the first person to, you were the first person to talk about, if it fits your macros and flexible dieting. I hadn't heard that before until we talked about it. So I owe you that. And now,
I don't remember directing you towards that, and I think both of our kind of ideas have changed over time, and different than the other guests that I've had on, I guess, is that, like, I could say that we're friends. Not that I'm not friendly with some of the other guests. It's just that not the kind of friends you would send like colorful memes to on WhatsApp. So it's probably been about, I'd say, 12, 13 years since we've known each other, and then I guess we've got like closer as friends, and we talk to each other not just about nutrition or whatever, and probably most time it isn't when we talk about nutrition or trying anything like that. We have very similar mindsets and kind of philosophies. We're similar age, from pretty much the same area, the same interests, and I think recently, just about 2 weeks ago or so, I signed up for Precision Nutrition Level 2, which is a coaching practice, and I'm doing the masters, etc., in nutrition, which is more scientific based. But basically, I signed up to that purely on your recommendations of that, and I think that's something that's kind of lost now with this kind of explosion of online nutrition or training coaching, is that people that have a PT degree, or not degree, a certification or whatever, or any kind of certification, or some people don't even have any certification, just have abs, that they're now nutrition coach online, and the art of coaching is kind of lost within that. And I've kind of come to terms with that, or a realization over the last couple of years, that you're not just going to be a good coach for just because you know like the nutritional sciences or training science or whatever, exercise science, doesn't mean you're a good coach. And in fact, a good coach could probably be a good coach in many industries, regardless of their specific knowledge. Obviously, that's extremely important, but I think coaching is something that a lot of people don't actually focus on, the art of coaching and how to coach people, separate to the science itself. And you're someone who I felt was a good coach, or are a good coach, and I think that's something that I look up to you or follow you or trying to improve my coaching skills. And it's kind of something that I'd been almost pulling the wool over my eyes for a couple of years when I kind of began and thought that, the more that I learn in terms of scientific practices, then that makes you a better coach or being able to deliver better results to people, which isn't necessarily true. So kind of segues us into the conversation that we want to talk about today, and it's kind of dealing with the pandemic or dealing with situations of adversity. It's kind of a different tone of conversation that I've had particularly with other guests, but I think that it would be great to talk to you about that. And like I said, we have similar kind of trains of thought and ways of thinking, and I thought that bouncing ideas or even my thoughts aloud off of you would be very helpful for the people that are listening. So I suppose we'll start off with 5G. We'll put on our tinfoil hats and how that causes. I was actually thinking of buying a tinfoil yesterday and just making a hat, and but it's insane the amount of people at the moment that I have on Facebook. I don't know if it's just me, but I have like a lot of people on my Facebook, quote unquote friends, that are have become overnight experts on how to how to not get the coronavirus by changing your nutrition, how the coronavirus is caused by Bill Gates or whatever. Yeah. It's just insane, some of the things. But first, how are you dealing with this on a personal basis? How do you deal with kind of situations of adversity or times of adversity? Because I think this is probably, for a lot of people, it is a lot different. We never experienced anything like this, but at the end of the day, there's always going to be times like this, and not specifically pandemics, but times of extreme adversity that cause a lot of pain or suffering or malaise in your life. So how do you deal with that personally, and how do you kind of coach your clients to deal with situations like this?
Yeah, so I think one of the main points to think about is, or I think what causes people a lot of frustration during something like this is really thinking that it should be any different than it is, right? So, because as long as you do that, you're not dealing with the reality of the situation. So it kind of comes back to that more fatty acceptance of fate in a way, because as soon as you can say, okay, well, things shouldn't be any different than they are because they are the way they are right now, then you can actually start to assess the situation and see, what issues are arising, what problems are you having, what troubles are there, and you can actually start dealing with that and actually making improvements the way things are right now. And that's something that I'm seeing. Well, that's something that I always see as a coach, but particularly now, it's people are incredibly frustrated that they can't, they've lost that autonomy of being able to come and go as they please, go wherever they want and see people, etc. But the longer that you spend agonizing over the fact that things should be any different than they are, I think that's a lot of wasted energy that could go towards just trying to actually figure out a plan right now to help you deal with the situation. And another one is, I think, that keeping some sort of perspective. That's why we listen or read a lot of books on concentration camp experiences and experiences in the gulags, to try and maintain some sort of perspective that things could be a lot worse, and also thinking about what really is the worst case scenario here. Because this is, again, something that not just now during a pandemic, but something I see a lot when coaching people, is that it's almost assumed that things are terrible without thinking through why that is. So often what I'll ask people to do is identify specifically, what are the issues here, and then when you can actually get to that point and you're looking at these issues or problems, then you can actually troubleshoot and try and look at a way at working around them, and making the best out of the situation, or at least not making it worse.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. That you're able to figure out what the worst case scenario is, and we kind of talked a little bit about before we start recording, how some people see the situation, especially younger people, I guess, that it's not a big deal. If I get sick, that it's not going to cause me any issues. It might be like a flu or something like that, and they don't really see this whole situation as worrying at all, and everything is business as usual, metaphorically speaking. So it doesn't affect them emotionally. Others, I think, it can, even if you don't feel like personally you can, it will affect you in terms of physical health or illness. I think some people just react differently, and it's not that people should feel guilty about it. And I think especially with guys, etc., they often feel guilty or embarrassed that they might be affected emotionally about something. And we haven't actually talked about this, but because we haven't really spoke in terms of vocally over the last while, since before this, or since in the last few weeks. But I actually think I had the coronavirus. I mean, I wasn't that sick. I couldn't get tested, or at least the test got cancelled. But my whole family actually had the coronavirus. I don't live with them, but I don't live that far away. But I think they were one of the first like 20-30 people in the country to get it, and most of them are fine, but my dad was like very, very sick. He was in hospital for almost 2 weeks, and he, like, at some points we thought that he was like not going to get through it. Like, he doesn't have any underlying health conditions or anything like that, but he was like really, really bad, to the point where like they had no idea what they were going to do. They were giving him all these different types of drugs, just throwing everything at it, and it still wasn't like improving. So like you said, I had to kind of think about, and it seems like on paper that you're being negative or being pessimistic about thinking about what's the worst that could happen. But there's actually kind of a liberation in thinking about that. What would happen if actually the worst came to it? Like, it's exposing yourself to that feeling. Like, what is the worst that could happen? Because then it more objectifies. It brings it back to, being able to deal with the situation instead of just blowing it up potentially and feeling like you have no sense of control whatsoever.
Yeah, no, yeah, didn't know any of that. Jeez. But your dad's all right now, because he's a pretty fit guy as well, isn't he? He's in good.
Yeah, and
good
that was the I think he was training for like a half marathon or something like that before, but I think it was like community transmission or whatever, and they went to London, and they probably hadn't had there probably wasn't as many cases in the country, basically recorded. So there was probably way more than they actually expected. I think even in London there was only maybe less than 100, and like, if you think of I think it's 8 million people in London, so like that's just crazy coincidence, extremely unlucky. But yeah, so during that whole time I was like thinking, like, what's the worst that could happen, and if that did happen, what would that mean? And
yeah,
that it did, in a sense, it did make me feel worse in a way, because you could just kind of push it aside and then not think about it. But then also that can backlash and make you feel a lot worse, because you're just blowing something up and not trying to deal with the situation. And like, for me, this whole obviously that's kind of a unique scenario, but it's not to say that won't happen to many other people. We don't really know how this kind of play out, but like, maybe not their parents, but maybe their grandparents, or their aunties or uncles, or whoever, or siblings, or someone who has like conditions. But I think, yeah, for me, even like we talked about that, depending on who your circle of influence is, like, you're following people on, and like, if they're following you or I, they're probably following other people in like the health or fitness industry, and there can be this perspective that everything is well and good, and that now you have loads of more time to train and do all the cook, and how positive this can be. And not to say that there isn't positives in every negative situation, that there can always be things, even in the worst, you can always take some learning from it. But I think even me, I've personally kind of struggled a little bit with the lack of routine. Obviously, given my situation, I was under a bit more stress. I wasn't eating as well. I tend to lose appetite a little bit. Like, it's just hard for me to get in enough calories. I get this kind of sickly feeling almost in the stomach, and it's just hard for me. And I like, people would look up to you or I guess, and think that we're the epitome of good health or good habits, and it's not necessarily always true. And I think it's important that people realize that everybody reacts to certain situations in different ways. And I have friends who think this is all bullshit and it'll blow over, and it doesn't affect them whatsoever. And now obviously dealing a lot better with it, but it's important to realize that it's okay to not be okay. I know that's kind of a slogan that's going to be passed around, but it's okay not to feel sometimes struggle with things. I have other kind of examples of that as well, but I'd like to hear what your kind of thoughts are on that.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like, I don't think it's realistic to go through this whole thing without feeling some sense of worry at times. Again, it depends on your situation. It depends on if you've a lot of people who are close to you that are potentially vulnerable. I think naturally you're going to worry about that more than like some of the people you mentioned that are kind of thinking it's sort of a narrow view to think, oh well, this isn't going to affect me personally that badly as an individual, so I'm not going to really consider it. Like, there's a level of interdependence to think about, and it's why we have to do this lockdown and the social distancing and all. It's to everyone to take collective responsibility, but that only arises out of people taking individual responsibility. And yeah, I mean, it could be really bad for a lot of people, and it likely will be. And yeah, I think thinking about what maybe the worst case scenarios are is a good idea. It sounds like you're just worrying about it, but it's as we both know, it's a Stoic philosophy exercise, the premeditatio malorum, or meditation on evil, as it's translated. And the idea is that, like, it takes the sting out of it a little bit, if it does come to pass. Now, like you said, it feels shitty in the moment because you're actually having to feel some of those feelings, and obviously that's going to be uncomfortable. But as you also said, it's a case of, if it does come to pass, it'll you've somewhat prepared for it, and you maybe have somewhat of a plan or know how you might respond, instead of just a reaction and blowing up and maybe being a lot worse off for it. And I mean, I never think it's a good idea to invalidate how you're feeling at a given time. Like, it's not a good idea to say, I shouldn't be feeling this way, because again, that comes back to the reality. It's like, well, you are feeling that way, so you got to do what you can to look after yourself, and do what you can to protect the people around you and protect the community. Like I said, that's by taking responsibility as an individual. If we all do that, then that's a collective responsibility. And in terms of, like, one of probably the main thing I'm seeing my clients struggle with is that lack of routine and a lack of structure, like you alluded to, that you're struggling with yourself. And for most people, it's pretty much a case of, for however many years or whatever. Now, if you're in the workforce, or going to school, you're in college, whatever it is, you have a schedule given to you essentially that you just have to follow, and potentially now that's just kind of pulled out from under you. And it's a simple enough solution, but maybe not easy, and that you have to then make a structure for yourself, basically, and make a routine for yourself. And I suppose, because I've been working from home for full time for about 15 months at this stage. It's I'm used to it, but at the same time, it's something I've noticed now and during this that more people are having to do this, or they have to be at home if they're working or not. That I've started to notice the things that I actually do without thinking about it too much, to help me keep going and kind of have good days. And a lot of that comes down to planning the day to some extent, because if you just get up and try and freestyle it tends not to run very well. And also, I'll say the day never runs exactly as planned. So when you do, like, we can talk about structuring days if you want, because that is kind of the main thing that I've had to help people with at the moment. But yeah, you want to have some leeway within that structure as well, because if you try and schedule everything to like the exact minute, or exact like 15-minute block, you're quickly going to fall behind, and then you're just going to feel more stressed about it and be worse off in general.
Yeah, and do you find that, like, perhaps that lack of routine that people have in their life leads to, more stress or emotional turmoil, and then does that lead? Have you seen that leading to perhaps overeating or boredom eating or stress eating? Is that something that you've noticed with people, because of that routine? Has it kind of messed up their nutritional habits a little bit?
Yeah, I mean the boredom eating definitely, and then emotional eating, as a result of stress. Now I think my clients that are already struggling with emotional eating, it's just continuing basically at home for them. There hasn't been too many people that are, I'd say, eating more out of stress. They don't usually do it, but there's definitely a lot more people that are eating out of boredom, because of that lack of structure. Because for a lot of people, they're now constantly within 30 seconds of their kitchen potentially. A lot of people who are working from home, they might be working in their kitchen if that's the only place there's a kitchen table. And like as simple as saying, try and face your back to the presses and the fridge and stuff, so it's not constantly in your line of sight. And that's a big one for trying to mitigate engagement in habits that you don't want to engage in. Keep it out of sight and it's out of mind. And but then there's also the flip side of that, where people, now that they don't have, I need to be in work for 9, therefore I have to eat my breakfast at 8, and then I get my lunch break at 1, so I have to eat a meal then. The little bit more freedom is allowing people to actually find a meal structure that suits them better. So I know a lot of my clients tell me they're eating a little bit later because they actually don't feel like eating as soon as they get up. And they have a bit more freedom and flexibility to their day now. So that's, a lot of the positives come from that you can now be more flexible, in terms of how you set up your day. It's taken that step to actually try and put some structure to it. And, have different strategies in mind if you feel yourself getting bored. Because I don't think people can just sit there for 8 hours and work constantly and not get bored. And it's more of a reaction to the feeling of, I want to feel a little bit different right now than I do, because the work is into the third hour of this block of work. It's getting a bit monotonous. I want to feel a little bit different, change my current state. And just for a lot of people, that it's easy to turn to food for that, or it's natural. Whereas you can do a lot more things instead of that will kind of change up the current situation, break the monotony a little bit, but that don't have to involve eating. And in one sense, people are potentially obviously not eating out as much, and then they're definitely not going out drinking as much. There could be people drinking more at home now, which actually I have seen a lot of, like just drinking more across the week because they're at home all the time. But you potentially have more control over the food environment now, provided you don't just resign yourself to ordering takeaways and drinking a bottle of wine every night. So that is one way that some people will be able to actually do better with the nutrition if they're the type that usually goes out and sinks a lot of pints at the weekend and eats out a lot, for example.
Yeah, and I think one of the main things I've noticed is with people who are extremely busy and they train in the gym, let's say before in the morning before they work, and then they get home from work maybe 6, 7, like by the time they get home and get set up, they have, like you said, a lot more opportunities to eat now, and the structure in place of specific times, not for the sake of nutrient timing, but just specific slots of when they would typically eat, has now been just blown up, like, wide open, and that can be beneficial for some people who maybe didn't have time to prepare meals or whatever before. But for those who now basically just get up and get out of bed and go into their living room and then pretty much don't move from there, it's kind of a little bit more difficult. So what I've noticed is helping people, or at least getting them to create some form of like default diet, or bones of a meal plan, where okay, at 9 or whatever, I'm gonna eat this kind of food. Like maybe I'll eat some eggs and change it, vary it up, or and then at lunch I'll have one meat thing, like one meat source, protein source, one carb source, and one whatever, and then one vegetables, and then like in the evening I might do the same, and then at nighttime I will always have a Greek yogurt and berries, or high fiber cereal or whatever, and keeping at least some form of structure where it's not just, all right, it's 1 o'clock, what do I eat now? Or it's 5 o'clock, what do I eat now? And that ends up just being like, oh, it's an afterthought. You think that's when people start thinking about, oh, I'll just get a takeaway, or oh, I've only eaten a sandwich all day. I need to eat 150 more grams of protein, and it's 8 o'clock at night. So having some form, trying to at least structure it that way, is a little bit better, I feel, for people who are able to, or to be able to kind of stay on track a little bit more, given that most people won't be used to flexibility of the amount of flexibility that they've had. Most people, like 99% of people, don't work from home and create their own schedule. Most people work for work for employers, or even if they are employees or employers themselves, they will have at least some structure. They'll go to the office, or they'll have, they'll be already kind of in tune with creating some form of structure.
Yeah, and it's kind of a case where the things that are good nutritional practices and habits and structures, in normal life, they still apply now. So you should still use them. Like you were saying there, like, we would never really suggest to our clients that they just freestyle the whole day of their nutrition. Like they always have certain targets to hit, certain amount of protein in each meal, getting a plant in there, trying to eat some high fiber foods or whatever it is. Like all of those are still applicable now, and they're still relevant. And funny one is that a lot of people have said to me they're getting kind of sick of cooking so much, because usually when they don't have as much free time, they would meal prep, like normal, like that's a fairly smart thing to do if you're trying to have better nutritional habits. And after like a week or two of this, it's like, oh, I'm getting kind of sick of like feeling like I'm in the kitchen all the time. And I'm like, yeah, well, of course, because like I said, I work from home all the time, but I still meal prep because I don't want to be spending loads of time in the kitchen every day. Like it's the same sort of things that apply. Just you would have had the option to maybe cook more. So I'm still encouraging people to meal prep so that they can still use that time to do other things that they want to do. Another one is like encouraging people to quote unquote walk to work. So a lot of people maybe don't have a commute anymore, so they have a bit more time from that. So even if they just put one half of their commute into maybe going for a walk first thing in the morning, or during the day at some point, just getting some air, getting some light exposure in the morning is a good idea anyway for circadian rhythms and sleeping better. But just to get a bit of movement. So like you said, you're not just going from bedroom to living room, and then that's the extent of the variation in your day for a long time.
Yeah, and with regards to nutrition, I've seen this quite a bit, and a lot of people posting about, oh, here's the coronavirus, and here's how to boost your immune system or change your nutrition to make sure your immune function is, heightened, with the kind of the insinuation that if you eat more carrots, you're not going to get the coronavirus. But what's your kind of thoughts around things like that?
Yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine about this the other day actually, and we both agreed that the role of nutrition has kind of been ruined and underplayed in a reaction to all the nonsense that's being thrown around by people who don't know what they're talking about. So because there's so much garbage, like eat this teaspoon of grated ginger and you won't get the coronavirus. Because there's so much of that, like as an evidence-based nutrition community, we kind of have to push back on that, and I think we're then overshooting it to the point where it's like, well, it's the coronavirus, so what you eat doesn't make a difference. Like, of course, it makes a difference, and I think there are certain nutrients, and like, it's funny. I'll get asked, what's the best diet for XYZ situation, or what food should I eat for this, and inevitably what tends to happen is that it's the same damn diet for every single situation pretty much. It's like there's sort of a loosely defined quote unquote healthy diet that pretty much caters for everything. It's like, and throw lifestyle into that as well, like sleeping well and managing stress and being active. And it's sort of the same thing with the coronavirus. So like, generally eating a high quality diet. Now there's like I'll keep saying, there's a lot of nonsense being thrown around.
I don't think, like, how would diet stop 5G from giving you the coronavirus anyway? I'm joking if people think I've actually made some joke posts about that, like on Facebook, like kind of these sly digs on like just conspiracy theories, and there's people commenting on it, not getting that it's a joke. I'm I'm so afraid. It's like, all right, it's kind of awkward.
They don't get the satire. Yeah, no. See, what you do is if you eat an entire raw egg whole, the shell and all, your skin becomes like a shell, which protects you from 5G radiation. Not many people know that. Nutritionists hate.
Yeah, you saw it on a YouTube video, so it must be true.
Oh yeah, not just any YouTube video, like a good one. But no, there are certain nutrients that play a role, like vitamin D, and we would have been talking about that before, but now there's actually published research that came out of it was Trinity College, wasn't it, and DIT, a doctor and a nutritionist there. Published a paper on vitamin D, and it's like, vitamin D is fairly well known to reduce the risk of infections, especially respiratory tract infections, when your levels are adequate, and it's one of the most common deficiencies. So, I mean, to say that having adequate vitamin D levels isn't a good thing in relation to coronavirus, or it doesn't matter, is a bit, I don't know. It's a bit reductionist, and it's not true, because if you do have adequate vitamin D levels, yes, we don't know much about the novel coronavirus and how exactly these things will interplay, but it kind of comes back to just being healthy overall. So like, having adequate vitamin D levels is a good marker of health, like no matter what you're looking at, and it has some promise in different infections. Like, obviously we don't know about coronavirus because it's a brand new thing, but if you look at it in other contexts, it's not like it's ever going to be harmful to say to people, make sure you have adequate vitamin D levels, which is how I gauge things a lot sometimes. Is like, what's the risk of trying this out if there's a potential upside and there's very little or no risk to it, why not? And like, vitamin A, potentially having adequate intake of vitamin A, or maybe supplementing with it, that's shown in different viruses to be somewhat protective. Again, we can't say that it applies to something like coronavirus, but if you can support your immune system in a full sense, that's obviously going to give you a better chance, potentially.
Yeah. I think the way to think about it is that you should be doing this anyway. So it's like, if you're deficient, it could potentially have quite a positive effects. Not by stopping you from getting it, of course, but it's all about, if you're already deficient, you should be trying to do this anyway to stop you from getting other infections or other
Yeah.
illnesses. But it's not like, okay, well, I'm taking, or I'm taking vitamin D, or I'm getting enough sunlight already, or now by taking 10,000 IU's of vitamin D per day, I'm going to be super boosting my immune system, and that can
Yeah.
actually have negative side effects like higher calcification, etc. So there actually can be potential negative effects by overdoing it in some vitamins or minerals. And I think if this scenario or this kind of situation leads you to eat an overall better quality diet, that's great. But just think about it, that you're doing this not because you think it's going to stop you from getting the coronavirus or stop you getting sick, but
Yeah.
more so that this is an opportunity perhaps to be able to do that. And that's great if this kind of kickstarts that, that's great. But
Yeah.
just make sure that you continue that. And I've kind of thought about how much of a role, and because nutrition is so so nuanced and there's so many moving parts, it's hard to kind of say. I'm thinking about how would like an inadequate diet or versus an adequate diet play out in this specific scenario if you got it right. So I'm thinking like perhaps like if you're on the edge of like, let's say, getting really sick or not getting really sick, like
Mm.
being hospitalized, not hospitalized, like in this one specific scenario, the exact same person in this two different kind of situations, one with adequate, one with inadequate diet. Maybe a healthy diet would prevent one from getting pushed over the edge, but it doesn't mean that all young people are because they're not getting sick because their diet's better or anything like that. So I think it's important, but it's going over and beyond what's recommended on a daily basis isn't necessarily going to make any difference whatsoever.
That's an important point. That once you take care of any potential deficiencies, improve the overall quality of your diet, it's not going to become more beneficial to super dose or mega dose vitamin D, for example, or vitamin A or vitamin C or whatever it is. But making sure that all those levels are adequate, and for a lot of people, they're probably not going to be, because the average diet. Now, the people listening to this probably eat better than the majority of people. But those are considerations to make, and you have to think about like why you're making those nutritional interventions. Like it's not that, because you see some ridiculous stuff like people saying I can't get the coronavirus because I don't eat carbohydrates. There's never a glucose molecule in my body, so I'm safe. It's like no, that's ridiculous. But
Yeah.
you definitely can support your health, because and I think that's should be fairly intuitive, that like the better you eat, the either it reduces the likelihood of you getting sick, or what you were saying there, it may not be as bad. And that's a worthwhile thing to strive for.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. With regards to like training, I know that you're a nutritionist specifically, but what are you doing for your own training, and how do you kind of think about it? Because this could be going on for a long, long period of time. I kind of I did buy a squat rack and weights. I wasn't naive in thinking when the gym said they were going to be closed for 2 weeks that it was going to reopen, and I knew it wasn't, so I luckily bought stuff in advance. So I'm kind of okay with that. A lot of my clients have just basically sent them out a band and modified training that way. But what way are you kind of doing your training, and how do you think this might like affect it long term, or what your plans?
So it's definitely a difficult situation. If I think like you could think about the concept of fragility and anti-fragility amongst this. You've read Taleb's books, haven't you?
Yep.
Yeah. So if by not being able to access the gym, everything falls apart, like that's a fragile situation. Whereas if you can do better as a result of this, and that's the way I'm trying to look at it for myself. Now I'm, maybe in a slightly different position to a lot of people listening to this, or a lot of people you coach, because they're very, very much physique orientated, as I have been and as I am still to an extent. But I'm at the moment I'm thinking about, okay, when this is all over, which could be a long time, I want to be a much better Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu athlete. So at the moment, I'm working a lot more on conditioning and overall cardiovascular fitness, and just looking to maintain levels of muscle mass and strength. Because, like, realistically, if you put me against most of my opponents, most of them are not going to be more muscular or stronger than me, but they might be better conditioned. So really, I don't need to be spending an inordinate amount of time trying to build more muscle and strength with that in mind. Now, I do, because I enjoy that, and that's still how I train most of the time. It's how I've always trained. But at the moment, I'm doing less pure strength and hypertrophy work, but more muscular endurance, more explosive strength, more conditioning work, and more running as well. And that's also, I'm taking a lot of it from Ross Enamate, Ross Training.
No, I've never heard of him.
Oh, okay. He's been around in the S&C circles for as long as I've been reading about training. But it turns out he's actually Katie Taylor's boxing coach, I think, as well. But cool. He has an ebook called Never Gymless, and it's on sale for $1 at the moment. Obviously because of the current situation. So it's a book just all about, well, mostly body weight training and exercise. And because he has a martial arts background or a boxing background, he, it's set up to work all those sort of modalities as opposed to just pure strength, pure hypertrophy. But I think so that would be an example of being anti-fragile, is where, okay, as a result of this, that you actually come out of this fitter, and I'm working a lot more on mobility as well. So actually, my body feels pretty good actually at the moment, because I'm doing more mobility work. I'm not beating myself up with heavy weights at the moment, and have mixed up my training a little bit more. So that's how I'm doing it personally. And then it's a case of doing what you can. And again, it comes back to facing the reality of it. It's, it does you no good thinking, oh, well, the gym should be open and I should be in there squatting 250 kilos. But that's not the case. So think about what the reality is, what you actually need to do. Like, what are the problems? Like, that's what we were talking about at the start. Like, what are the issues? Okay, so the issues are maybe for most of your listeners and most of your clients, it's losing muscle tissue or not being able to gain muscle tissue. So then it's like, okay, well, what factors are required to make that happen? Like, it's like going to a gym is not a requirement. Like, we know that. Both of us know that going to a gym is not a requirement for building muscle mass. It's, some sort of resistance applied to the muscles sufficiently, and you'll know more about this than I do, to create that hypertrophy response. So you look at that. That's what you need to. That's the requirement. So how can you do that, and can you do that at home in some way? And how do you change up your training? Like, do you still have to train to failure points, and that just means you have to do more reps, potentially to get the same sort of response or whatever it is, and just to make the most of it. And there's plenty of resources, like that book I mentioned, Never Gymless, is pretty good. It's not entirely equipment free. Like, he does love pull-ups, so there's a door frame pull-up bar or something to do pull-ups on is recommended. But what are you talking to people about? It's like in that.
Yeah, I think. Well, obviously, everybody can't buy a squat rack. But even then, after, like, I'd never really used home training before, just because the gym has always been at my disposal, and I like going to the gym as well. But I've actually realized that you can actually do quite a bit, like, with minimal equipment. I think the more you can get to a point, there's like diminishing returns, but the more you can get from, if you have nothing, getting like a bands or something like that can definitely help, and make you can make it pretty good. And like you said, like, you have to realize what the situation is. If it was 2 weeks, but then you can perhaps even not train for 2 weeks and then get back at it. But like, if this is long term, you gotta adapt to what we can do. And for some people that I've worked with, even, I think it's actually opened my eyes that perhaps we can actually do some home workouts, because they can't make the gym that frequently, or they can only make it once or twice a week. That now adding in how effective these can actually be. I know I've changed my kind of train of thought on it. Initially, I thought it was more about preserving muscle, or maybe even losing a little bit of muscle. But now by perhaps doing different movements or training muscles through different planes, etc., that you haven't done before, especially if you're kind of newer trainer or maybe a little bit more intermediate rather than say really advanced, you can actually probably make some good progress if you're just consistent and try make progress, and obviously consistent with nutrition, etc., during this period, however long it's going to be.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not like that body weight or minimal equipment training doesn't work. Like if you look at the upper bodies of gymnasts, they're fairly enviable for anyone who's physique orientated. And then you just have to figure out how to overload the lower body, right?
Yeah, it's obviously a little bit harder, but there's ways you can kind of manage around it. But Brian, do you have any last kind of final thoughts on this whole scenario? In regards to nutrition or productivity or anything like that?
I think we've covered most of it. Like it is just, I think the main thing is it's on each individual to create their own structure, and there's once you accept that, then it's actually pretty good because then you have more flexibility to set up your day how you want to, which, if you ask people on the face of it, most people would probably be like, oh yeah, I'd love to be able to just decide how my day would run. Well, you're in somewhat of a better position to do that now, potentially. So you can take advantage of that. And it's the same nutritional and lifestyle principles still apply, in terms of how you set up your meals and how you set up your nutrition. So it's just about transferring that to the home situation, and again, specifically defining what the issues might be, and then actually getting to work on looking for solutions to them, rather than just assuming it's going to be really, really difficult, or it's going to be really, really hard to maintain good habits. Because yes, it might be in a lot of cases more difficult, but you need to actually look at it closely and say, okay, what can I actually do here to try and keep things on point?
Yeah. All right, Brian, thanks for that. So where can we find out more info about you and your coaching?
So the Instagram is probably the best place. So Brian Háonghusa is my personal Instagram. That's I'm sure you'll have my name listed somewhere.
There's no point even trying to spell that. I'll link it.
And then the Fit Clinic, also on Instagram. We put out a lot of free content there, as well as on the website, thefitclinic.ie, and that's where you can find out more about the coaching services that we offer. We've got a great team of coaches, so I think we do help a lot of people out. So yeah, those are the best places. Like my own Instagram is a bit more personal, more more talking about mindset and maybe philosophy at times, as well as nutrition and lifestyle. And then the Fit Clinic is all nutrition and lifestyle and everything health related.
All right, cheers, man.
Okay, Sam, Adam, talk to you soon.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that podcast with Brian. Brian is a close friend of mine. We have been for over 10 years now. And like we mentioned, with regards to nutrition, it's nothing really that you need to change or do other than just what we recommend for just overall good general health, and following any specific advice online to boost your immune system beyond just eating better in general is basically just bullshit, to be honest. And with regards to situations like this, it's try to make the best out of a bad situation. Try and accept the situation that you're in. It is what it is, and just take it for what it is, and try to at least extract something positive out of this negative situation. But if you do find that you struggle with this situation emotionally or mentally, like you're finding certain situations tough, and any situations that you may feel you shouldn't objectively be feeling that way, it's not something that you should be hard on yourself about, because everybody reacts to different situations differently. So hopefully some of the advice that we have talked about here is applicable, and you can use that. Try your best to, like I said, set up a routine. It actually has been kind of difficult for me as well with the lack of routine. It took me a while to kind of figure it out. I ended up spending way too much time working and not being as productive during that working period, and my diet kind of went out the window a little bit, or at least I wasn't eating as well as I had been. Just hadn't as much access to bigger supermarkets, not as much variety or choice. But given that this is going to be planned out longer, I have kind of changed the way or structured my diet in a way that I'm able to now get back into some form of routine and eating well again, so that I just don't turn into a fat blob. But if you do want to follow Brian and get more information about him, or you have any questions, I'm sure he'll answer those if you reach out to him on social media. You can find my email address and my social media handles in the show notes as always. But hopefully you enjoy this podcast. It was a little bit different, but if you do have any feedback or anything like that, please do reach out, and I will chat to you in the next episode.